Okay, so in this episode of What If, I'm going to start covering methods of how I enter in on a person. Obviously, in a self-defense situation, I'm not trying to be the antagonist. I'm not trying to escalate the situation. But in Warrior Flow, we have a kind of a different philosophy when it comes to dealing with a situation. In other words, in law enforcement, they have the escalation of force ladder. Some people use a color code system, nothing wrong with that. But that works for law enforcement because law enforcement, they're required to stop people first. They're trying to de-escalate everything first and then only use lethal force if necessary. So they start at the bottom and they work their way up. In a self-defense situation, because you're not a cop or if you're not law enforcement, you have to start from the position of, I'm prepared to fight if I have to. I'm going to try to de-escalate it, but I'm prepared to go to that place if necessary. And that's because your situation could change dramatically. And you're not held to the same standard that a law enforcement officer is because he's got a badge, he's got a gun, he's got a lot of other tools, but his main thing is to stop someone. So one of the things I try to get people to do is practice a couple key things that you can do that are very simple. So in Warrior Flow, one of the reasons why we put so much emphasis on developing your body, especially through not only the principles of Warrior Flow, but also different exercises, is so that when the time comes where you have to do something, you've already developed those purposeful habits, as Grandmaster Karen used to say, where you already know how to do stuff. So one of the things, two things I'm going to show, and then I'll demonstrate it a little bit, and then later on I'm going to show how those things apply, especially when you're using the flow and how the flow comes in. Is you've probably seen this in some of the other exercise videos where I do kind of like this dog paddle thing, and all I'm doing is, in a very natural way, rolling my hands forward. This is one of the things I do. And the reason you want to practice that, and this is something that I teach, is to start training the muscles to be able to move if you have to accelerate the violence. And so by relaxing the arms and practicing these movements, then I'll go back and forth like I'm chopping. I'll even do some elliptical movements. Then I'll even do some things where I'll hammer fist up and down, chopping up and down. The reason I practice those things is because of the fact that I want my muscles to be already preconditioned and have that muscle memory so that when I have to tap into it, the first time I got to go crazy on somebody and put foot to behind, so to speak, is not when I'm in a real situation. From there, within your own training, you want to start practicing some very practical entry moves if you have to enter. So in Warrior Flow, we try, if we have to enter on someone, we try to get in as quickly as possible. So our philosophy is move first, move with intention, and strike with utter and complete ruthlessness. You don't have time to be playing games. You can use deception, and I'll do a video on how I use deception, how I would incorporate deception. But the bottom line is, in the initial phase, what I'm trying to do, or what I'm trying to get people to do, is learn how to move with their entire body and strike with utter ruthlessness. So when I'm moving in with the body, in Warrior Flow, everything comes from the root for the most part. So as I'm pushing off from the root, what I'm doing is, as I'm pushing from the root, say I'm going to do a chop, my hands are up like, hey, and I'm trying not to get into a situation. As I push from the root, what I'm doing is I'm dropping in with the body, pushing from the root, dropping in. As I'm extending the arm, I'm hitting with this ridge here if I'm doing a chop. But what I'm doing is I'm pushing from the root and landing and dropping and practicing timing that initial drop to get in on someone. From there, I may follow up with a palm strike, or I may even throw another chop. It really all depends on what I feel I need to do. What's important to understand, though, is you want to start off with a few basic movements where your hands are in a position where, should they suddenly attack, you can protect yourself and then go from there. Or your hands in a position where, if you have to feel you need to preemptively strike, then you can do so. The other thing we do in Warrior Flow is, as we're pushing from the root, we try to angle our body just enough, not so much just going directly straight, but just enough, bringing the hands up and protecting the head as we're entering on people, whether I'm rolling my hands forward or entering with just a straight chop, to try to slightly get myself offline. You don't have to move offline much. I'm just trying to move slightly offline to gain penetration, while at the same time gaining penetration, I'm also getting out of the way. So when I'm practicing this or I'm demonstrating, a lot of times I move more than what would be necessary if I had a person in front of me, because of the fact that I'm also trying to demonstrate that I am slightly getting offline. As I'm entering on people though, I'm actually feeling my way through, which is where the flow comes in, and I'll do another video where I show how the flow integrates in with your striking. So as I'm practicing these basic movements, I'm just developing my muscles to be able to have just the kind of, neuromuscular coordination, and also focus on moving my arms as naturally as possible so that my arms don't get all rigid and I create unnecessary tension, which is what I see in a lot of training videos where people, they're creating unnecessary tension, or they're trying to demonstrate, but they're not explaining that the arm is very relaxed and to the point where they're throwing the strike, and then at the point of impact where they're hitting with power. So the other thing is practicing also rolling those hands and moving those hands in different positions. Very much like the anywhere striking drill, where you're practicing moving and positioning your arms, your elbows in all of these different positions, with the idea that in a real situation, you really don't know where the attack may come. It's nice if the person's standing in front of you talking trash, but if it's a sudden attack, you got to be able to protect yourself from wherever. The bad guy gets a vote in the fight. So if I'm practicing on a heavy bag or something like this, again, I may measure off, bringing the hands up, in kind of a protective position, and then pushing from the root. And as I'm pushing from the root, I'm getting the timing now where I'm dropping in, bringing the hands up or arms up to try to protect my head a little bit as I'm entering, because I want to really protect in this area in particular. I can take some grazing shots here on the top of the head, but on the side of the head or in the throat or in the neck area, there's really no give in the neck. It's going to be a problem. And as I'm entering on people, pushing from the root, practicing this kind of motion, and really from different positions. I know that there are people who teach, well, you want to start from this position, you want to start from this position, you want to... Me personally, I say practice all that stuff. I say get comfortable moving with all that stuff. And the reason is because, again, how you train is how you're going to fight. You don't know where the fight's going to come from. So as you're practicing basic things, start off with simple things and then start experimenting on your own with different positions to put your hands or placing your arms. Now, I know there are some people who will say, well, if you do that, you may create confusion in people. And I totally disagree with that. Totally disagree. And the reason is, once a person gets used to being able to move a certain way, now it becomes acceptable for their brain to drive their body to make those decisions, because it's not alien to their body, if that makes sense. It's kind of like I'm driving in my car and all of a sudden I see something in the road and I go, whoa, and I turn the wheel. Well, I don't turn the wheel all the way and run up on the sidewalk and run 15 people over some stupid thing. No, I just turn it just enough to negotiate the car around it, right? So the question is, how did you learn how to do that? Well, because you've been driving long enough where you develop the coordination and the timing, and also, kind of the embodied cognition to know just enough to turn the wheel. Well, it's the same thing when you're moving your arms. This is the reason why you train. This is the reason why you practice these skills, and why you got to practice these skills until it, develops to the subconscious competence level where you just don't really have to think about it. So as I'm entering again, the hands are up, and I try different positions. I even do different striking combinations, because what I want to do is I want to train myself to be able to just strike with whatever, wherever, whenever. And if you practice striking like that, if you practice moving like that, you can actually do it. In other videos, I'm going to cover some other things as far as different ways in which you can practice building on this skill, pushing from the root, doing different things as you're pushing from the root. But the idea is getting into the habit of getting off your stuff as quickly as possible.